No term is misused in American politics more than the word socialism. Liberals use it to describe countries like Norway and Denmark, while conservatives use it as a slur to criticize things like minimum wage increases and Medicare for all. Fox News once even used it to criticize billionaire investor Warren Buffett when he publicly supported raising taxes on the very wealthy.
Warren Buffett wrote an op-ed. Is he completely a socialist?
Is Warren Buffett a socialist? You really have no clue what socialism is, do you?
Unfortunately, most Americans have no clue what socialism is either, and they definitely don't know how democratic socialism fits into the whole picture. Even though traditional definitions of socialism don't actually fit the current political narratives in the US, let's take a look at where these terms came from. Historically speaking, socialism was seen as somewhat of a halfway point between capitalism and communism. Under this spectrum, democratic socialism fits somewhere in between capitalism and socialism, and the policies that Bernie Sanders and AOC are proposing, things like Medicare for all and free college, would fall somewhere between capitalism and democratic socialism, an area that analysts typically call social democracy. So what do all these terms mean? Capitalism is all about letting the free market generate unlimited profits for corporations and individuals. The downside of capitalism is that when it's unregulated, it leads to things like child labor, contaminated air and water, and the concentration of wealth in the hands of very few. Communism is about creating a classless society with absolute equality, where the government dictates the price, supply, and distribution of goods. The downside of communism is that the only practical way to redistribute wealth with absolute equality is by force. So these governments usually end up becoming authoritarian regimes. Socialism arose as an attempt to merge the best parts of capitalism with the best parts of communism. The traditional definition of socialism basically says that there should be some free market systems to determine supply and demand of products, but that the government should own the country's major industries so that the people can benefit from most of the wealth. The downside to socialism is that it's very vulnerable to corruption. If the people running the traditional socialist system are corrupt, then these types of socialist governments will also skew towards authoritarianism. So what about democratic socialism? Democratic socialists still believe in social ownership of major industries, either through the government or through worker alliances, but they reject two main aspects of traditional socialism. One, they sharply reject any type of undemocratic or authoritarian system. And two, they reject the Soviet-style planned economies, where the government determined the price and supply of goods. There's a lot of debate about what exactly democratic socialism entails, but in essence, democratic socialists believe that workers should enjoy a larger share of the profits that they are helping to generate. They also believe that strong social safety nets are essential for the stability and long-term growth of society. It's interesting to note that America's most famous self-described democratic socialist, Bernie Sanders, is opposed to the idea that the government should own the country's major industries, which in economic terms are called the means of production.
So the next time that you hear me attacked as a socialist, remember this. I don't believe government should take over, the grocery store down the street or own the means of production. But I do believe that the middle class and the working families of this country who produce the wealth of this country deserve a decent standard of living and that their incomes should go up, not down.
When looking at the policies that Bernie Sanders is proposing, things like an increasing minimum wage, Medicare for all, and free college education, most analysts agree that these ideas fall in line with the successful policies of the Nordic countries, where they call themselves social democracies. Social democracies are basically capitalist systems with really strong social safety nets. So what can you do? It's important to look at the actual policies that each candidate is proposing and not just the words they're throwing around. For example, just because North Korea calls itself a democratic republic and the rapper Dr. Dre calls himself a doctor does not mean that North Korea is anything close to a democracy, nor should you seek medical advice from Dr. Dre. Also, let's remember that most countries in the world have mixed economies, and none of them fit neatly into one economic model. The word socialism has basically lost all practical meaning in political discourse, so it's ultimately up to us to determine what it means based on who is using it and the policies that they are supporting. Peace.